Hey, old-timer. The voice cut through the low hum of the Bluebird Cafe like a guitar string snapping mid-song. Derek Briggs, 26 years old, lead guitarist of Crimson Hammer, and absolutely certain of his own greatness, stood in the middle of the room with his instrument still hanging from his shoulder and his confidence hanging even heavier. He was pointing, not at the stage, not at the bar, at the corner table in the back, where an old man in a black coat sat alone with a battered guitar case resting on the chair beside him and a cup of coffee cooling in his weathered hands. "You've been sitting in that corner all night looking like you're somebody," Derek said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "So either pick up that guitar and prove it, or admit you're just another old cowboy who thinks sitting in a music bar makes him a musician." His bandmates laughed. The drummer, Marcus, tapped out a little rim shot. The bassist, a kid named Cole, leaned against the stage and crossed his arms like he was watching something that was about to be very entertaining. The old man in black did not flinch. He did not raise his voice. He did not move quickly. He just looked up from his coffee slowly with eyes that had seen things that would make younger men go quiet. And he let the silence sit there between them like something solid. Then he said two words. "You sure?" His voice was low, unhurried. It had the texture of gravel and the weight of a Sunday morning hymn, and something about it made the bartender stop wiping down the counter without knowing exactly why. For a moment, no one in the Bluebird Cafe moved, but that moment didn't start there. If you want to know what happened next in that room, what one Tuesday night in Nashville did to everyone inside it, hit that subscribe button right now, because this is a story that music circles have whispered about for 30 years, and you are about to hear all of it. The night didn't start as a confrontation. It started as an escape. Nashville, Tennessee. October 1993. The Bluebird Cafe sat quiet on a Tuesday night the way only a real music room can. Not empty quiet, but listening quiet, the kind of silence that collects in the walls of a place that has heard enough honest songs to know the difference between performance and truth. The pendant lights hung low over the tables. The bar top was sticky in the good way, worn smooth by 20 years of elbows and late nights. The walls were covered in signed photographs, musicians who had made it, musicians who hadn't, and musicians who were somewhere in between, still deciding which way they were going to fall. Johnny Cash was 61 years old that night, and by almost every measure that the music industry used to keep score, he was finished. The major labels had let him go. Country radio had moved on to shinier things and younger faces. The man who had stood at Folsom Prison in 1968 and made the entire room feel understood. The man who had sold out Carnegie Hall, who had hosted his own television show, who had defined an entire era of American music, was now the kind of name that younger executives referenced with polite respect and quiet dismissal. A legacy act, a museum piece, a legend, which in the language of the industry in 1993 was just a gentle way of saying, "Your time has passed." He had come to the Bluebird alone that night because a producer named Rick Rubin had called him 6 days earlier. The conversation had been short. Rubin had said, "Go somewhere that music still feels real to you. Don't perform, don't plan, just listen." Cash had told no one where he was going, not his manager, not his band. He had kissed June goodbye at the door of their house on Old Hickory Lake, told her he needed one night of air, and driven himself into Nashville with his 1956 Martin D28 in the back seat like a man carrying something he wasn't ready to put down yet. He ordered a coffee, found the corner table, and he sat down to remember who he was before the world decided what to do with him. He had no idea what was already walking toward him from the other side of that room. Crimson Hammer had played 3 sets that night and gotten louder with every one of them, not just in volume, but in certainty. Derek Briggs was the kind of young musician who mistook a crowd's applause for confirmation of everything he already believed about himself. He had the technical skill to back some of it up, which made the arrogance harder to argue with and easier to resent. His solos were fast and precise and built for reaction, designed to make the person watching feel like they had witnessed something, even if they couldn't explain exactly what. The crowd at the Bluebird had responded the way crowds respond to that kind of playing, enthusiastically, the way you applaud a magic trick before you figure out how it works. Between sets, Derek had been talking, loudly, about legacy, about how the giants of country music had been products of a simpler time, elevated by a lack of competition more than a surplus of talent. 3 chords and a sad story, he told anyone within earshot, leaning back in his chair with his guitar across his knee like a king holding a scepter. That's the whole formula. People act like it was some kind of genius. It wasn't genius. It was just first. His bassist Cole nodded along. Marcus the drummer laughed in the right places. Nobody at the table pushed back. But at the bar, a man named Roy, who had been working the Bluebird for 19 years and had heard enough music to know the real thing the moment it entered a room, had been watching the corner table since 8 o'clock. He hadn't said anything. He just kept wiping down the same section of bar top, slowly, the way a man moves when his hands need something to do while his mind is working. And then Derek stood up. He didn't walk toward the corner with any particular intent. It started as a performance for his bandmates, a joke to cap off the night, but the moment he opened his mouth and pointed, the joke stopped being a joke. The room felt it shift. The woman at table 4 put down her drink. The young songwriter near the window looked up from his notebook. Roy set down the bar rag. The old man in black had still not moved, and that was the thing that should have told Derek everything he needed to know, because men who have nothing to prove don't move quickly when they're challenged. They just wait. They let the moment come to them. His hand was resting on the guitar case latch, and the latch, without anyone noticing, was already open. And if you think you know where this night was going, stay with me, because what Derek Briggs said next made sure there was no way back for either of them. Here's what I think, Derek said, pulling a chair backward and sitting down at the edge of the old man's table without being invited. His voice had the particular confidence of someone who has never been truly embarrassed in public and therefore does not believe it can happen to him. I think you've been sitting in this corner all night because you used to be somebody in rooms like this. And I think that guitar case has been opened maybe twice in the last year. And I think if I handed you my guitar right now, you wouldn't know what to do with it in 1993. The room had gone the specific kind of quiet that happens when everyone present understands that something is about to occur that cannot be taken back. The old man looked at Derek for a long moment, not with anger, not with amusement, with something that was harder to read than either: patience. The deep, unshakable patience of a man who has already lived through the thing you are threatening him with. Then he stood up. He opened the guitar case himself. Inside, resting in worn velvet, was a 1956 Martin D28, its body darkened with age and use, the neck polished smooth where a thumb had traveled 10,000 miles of frets across 40 years of mornings and midnights. He lifted it out the way you lift something sacred, set the case aside, pulled his chair to the center of the floor without asking permission, without acknowledging the stage, without plugging into a single thing. Derek laughed. No amp? Come on, man. The old man didn't answer. He settled the guitar against his body, closed his eyes for just a moment, 3 seconds, maybe 4, and then he began to play. The first 4 notes landed in the room like a door opening onto something vast. It was not fast, it was not showy. It was the opening of a song that nobody in that room had ever heard before, a song that would not be recorded and released for another year, a song that would eventually make grown men pull over on highways because they could not see through what it did to them. But in that moment, in the Bluebird Cafe on a Tuesday night in October 1993, it existed only in that room, played by the only hands that knew it. And then he sang. That voice. There is no honest way to describe what Johnny Cash's voice did to a room when he decided to mean it. It did not perform. It did not demonstrate. It simply arrived, low and absolute, like weather, like a verdict, like the last honest thing left standing after everything false had been cleared away. Every word he sang landed with the full weight of a man who had earned the right to sing it. Derek Briggs stopped breathing somewhere in the second verse. He would not have been able to tell you exactly when. He just became aware, gradually, and then all at once, that his hands had gone still at his sides, and that his mouth was open, and that he could not have moved if someone had asked him to. The woman at table 4 was crying and did not seem to know it. Roy the bartender had both hands flat on the bar top, leaning forward, perfectly still. The young songwriter by the window had not written a single word in 4 minutes, which had never happened to him in his life. And then the recognition moved through the room, not as a shout, as a whisper, table to table, slow as a current finding its direction. "That's Johnny Cash." 3 words, passed from mouth to ear to mouth again, spreading outward from the front of the room to the back while the music continued over all of it. Derek heard it. He turned to Marcus. Marcus had already heard it. Cole had already heard it. The 3 of them stood in a row and watched the old man in the black coat finish the song they had never heard before, and the full weight of the last 20 minutes assembled itself in Derek's chest like something structural giving way. When the final note faded, the bluebird erupted, but Cash was already looking directly at Derek, quietly, without theater, the Martin resting across his knee. He said, "Son, the song doesn't care how fast you play it." That was all. If you've ever had a moment where the floor dropped out from under everything you were certain about, hit that like button right now, because this story is far from over, and what Derek did in the next 30 seconds is the part nobody saw coming. Derek Briggs did not take a bow. He did not look for an exit. He did not perform his humility for the room the way he had performed his confidence 20 minutes earlier. He walked directly across the Bluebird Cafe, still holding his guitar by the neck, and he sat down on the floor in front of Johnny Cash's chair, not in the empty seat beside it, on the floor, like a man who understood in that specific moment exactly how much distance there was between where he stood and where he needed to get to. "I'm sorry," he said. 2 words. No explanation wrapped around them, no qualifications, just the 2 words, offered plainly, the way you offer something when you have nothing else. Cash looked at him for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "How long have you been playing?" Derek said, "Since I was 9. Cash said, "What made you start?" And Derek, who had spent the entire evening performing certainty for everyone in the room, went quiet. When he finally answered, his voice was different, smaller, realer. "My dad," he said. "He played every Sunday morning before church, old country stuff. I used to sneak out of bed and sit on the stairs before he knew I was awake, just to hear it before the day started." Cash was quiet for a moment. He looked down at the Martin in his hands. Then he looked back up. "That's where it lives," he said. "Not in the technique, not in the speed. In the Sunday morning, in the stairs. That's the only thing worth chasing in a song, the feeling that made you want to play in the first place. Everything else is just decoration." He shifted the guitar in his hands. "You know Big River?" Derek nodded. Every guitarist in Nashville knew Big River. What happened next lasted 20 minutes and was never recorded. Johnny Cash and a 26-year-old kid from a bar band played together on the floor of the Bluebird Cafe while the room stood without speaking, without ordering drinks, without moving toward the door. Roy the bartender stayed at his post with his arms folded and his eyes bright. The young songwriter by the window finally opened his notebook, not to write down chords, but to write down exactly what it felt like to be in that room, in that moment, while it was still happening. When it ended, Cash set the Martin gently back in its velvet case. He reached into the inside pocket of his black coat, pulled out a cocktail napkin and a pen, wrote something, folded it once, held it out to Derek without explanation. Derek took it. Cash clicked the case shut, picked it up, and nodded once, the kind of nod that means everything has been said. Derek did not open the napkin that night. He put it in his jacket pocket and drove home with it sitting there, folded, in the dark. He would not open it until the next morning. And when he did, he called his mother before he called anyone else. The napkin said 2 lines. The first rule, mean every word. The second rule, there is no second rule. J.C. Derek Briggs read it standing in his kitchen at 7 in the morning with his jacket still on from the night before. He read it twice. Then he sat down on the kitchen floor, the same way he had sat on the floor of the Bluebird, and he called his mother. He didn't explain why he was calling so early. He just asked her if she remembered the way his father used to play on Sunday mornings before church. She said, of course she remembered. He said he remembered too. Then he thanked her and hung up and sat there for a long time without moving. He kept the napkin in his guitar case for the next 30 years. Crimson Hammer never made it, not the way Derek had been so certain they would that night at the Bluebird. The band dissolved within 18 months, the way most bar bands do, quietly and without a specific reason anyone could point to. But Derek kept playing. He changed the way he played. He stopped chasing speed and started chasing Sunday mornings. He started writing songs the way Cash had said, meaning every word, building from the feeling first and letting the technique follow behind it like a shadow follows a man. 3 of those songs were eventually recorded by artists who took them to #1 on the country charts. Derek's name appeared in the credits, small and unhurried, the way honest things tend to appear. He never told anyone publicly where the songs came from. He never told the story of that Tuesday night at the Bluebird, not in any interview, not on any stage. He kept it the way you keep something that belongs to you completely, privately, carefully, like a folded napkin in the bottom of a guitar case. But Roy the bartender talked. Roy had been working the Bluebird for 19 years when it happened, and he kept working there for 11 more. And in all that time, he told that story to every musician who sat at his bar and seemed like they needed to hear it. And 6 weeks after that Tuesday night in October, Johnny Cash walked into a studio with Rick Rubin and began recording American Recordings. One voice, one guitar, no decoration. The album that would reintroduce him to the world. The timing, as Derek would later say, was not a coincidence he was willing to argue with. As Cash reached the door of the Bluebird that night, Derek followed him out. Nashville air, October cold, the kind of cold that makes a city feel honest. Derek said, "Mr. Cash, I didn't know who you were when I said those things." Cash stopped walking, turned around slowly, looked at him the way a man looks at someone he has already decided to believe in. "I know you didn't," he said. A pause. "Long enough to mean something. That's the only reason I played." He picked up his guitar case, turned up the collar of his black coat against the October air, and walked to his car alone. Derek stood on the sidewalk and watched the taillights disappear down the street and did not move for a long time after they were gone. Johnny Cash released American Recordings in April 1994. It won the Grammy for Best Contemporary Folk Album. Rolling Stone called it one of the great comeback records in the history of American music. He went on to record 4 more American albums before he died in September 2003. Still meaning every word, still needing no decoration, still carrying everything he had ever survived directly into every song he sang. He proved something in those final years that no award and no chart position could have proven, that greatness does not expire. It just waits quietly in a corner booth for someone to be foolish enough to challenge it. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, it teaches you something on the way out the door. If this story moved something in you, if you have ever underestimated someone and been changed by what you found on the other side of that mistake, hit that like button and subscribe right now. We find the stories that time almost buried, and we bring them back where they belong. Drop in the comments the name of the one artist whose music made you hear everything differently. We read every single one. And if someone in your life needs to hear this story today, send it to them. Because some lessons travel better through music than through words, and some men in black coats are worth every second of your attention.